Have you ever seen someone step out of a luxury car and then complain about bills that still haven't been paid off? On social media, it can feel as if everyone's lifestyle is becoming more expensive at the same time. New gadgets, premium vacations, expensive restaurants, and new cars often appear to define what success should look like. The problem is that we usually see what gets displayed, not the pressure that comes with it. Many people appear wealthy on the outside while quietly living with constant financial anxiety. And often the real issue is not income itself, but the need to appear successful in front of other people. At the margin, we discuss money not as a status competition, but as a way to view modern life more clearly. Today we're exploring why looking rich can keep someone financially stuck and why financial freedom often looks far simpler than expected. In the past, symbols of success were mostly limited to what we could see in our immediate surroundings, but today they appear every time we unlock our phones. Social media has turned comparison into a daily activity, and the human brain was never built to process that amount of constant comparison. We begin comparing our ordinary lives to the highlight reels of other people, creating a comparison that was never balanced from the start. Over time, a feeling of falling behind starts to appear, even though what we are seeing is often the same illusion repeated again and again. The more often we see luxury, the more ordinary that luxury begins to feel. Things that once felt extraordinary can gradually start feeling like the minimum standard. Without noticing it, our financial targets begin changing based on social expectations rather than actual needs. This becomes an expensive trap because living standards can rise faster than income. When that happens, feeling satisfied becomes harder to find no matter how much money is earned. That is where the cycle begins to form, becoming a quiet pattern that slowly drains the future over time. Let's call this pattern the status loop, a cycle that looks normal on the surface but often ends up feeling exhausting. The first step is comparison, where we notice what other people seem to have. Then comes the urge to reach the same standard, even when personal finances may not support it. The next step is consumption, where purchases are made to create a certain impression. After that come the consequences that rarely appear in posts, as bills begin quietly following behind. Debt or financial pressure gradually appears, and the room to breathe becomes increasingly limited. That pressure creates stress, and the stress can encourage another round of emotional spending. The cycle repeats so gradually that years can pass while the same pattern remains in place. From the outside, it can look like progress, while internally it often feels more like survival. The longer someone stays in this loop, the harder it becomes to separate needs from image-driven choices. The biggest problem with status is not the price of the item itself, but the hidden costs that come attached to it. Expensive purchases often require an expensive lifestyle to support them long after the transaction is over. Take a luxury car, for example, because the monthly payment is only one part of the equation. Maintenance, insurance, and the pressure to maintain a certain image all take a share of future financial capacity. Many financial advisors describe the same pattern of high earners with surprisingly little net worth. They earn substantial amounts of money, yet nearly all of it goes toward maintaining appearances. Ironically, the people who look the most successful sometimes have the least financial flexibility. That happens when every increase in income immediately becomes an increase in lifestyle rather than assets. The issue is not enjoying the rewards of hard work, but recognizing the long-term cost attached to each decision. And the largest cost is often not money at all, but the loss of future options. If status is so expensive, why do people keep chasing it anyway? The reason is not entirely financial because part of it happens in the mind. Humans are social by nature and naturally want acceptance from the people around them. That is why status symbols can feel like a shortcut to recognition even when the effect fades quickly. Imagine someone buying an expensive watch right after receiving a large bonus at work. A few weeks later, that feeling starts fading just like most forms of pleasure do. Then a new standard forms and another target begins to appear. This is the status treadmill where people keep moving without feeling much progress. Each achievement becomes normal faster than most people expect because the brain adapts quickly. As a result, the need for validation keeps growing while satisfaction never fully settles. Fortunately, there is another cycle that operates very differently and follows a much healthier pattern over time. The first step is not comparing yourself with others, but setting aside part of today's resources for the future. That money is then directed toward investments instead of spending that disappears shortly after purchase. Over time, new skills begin to take shape because future income also needs to become stronger. As that process continues, life gradually offers more options, and options are often an overlooked form of wealth. Many people who eventually reach financial freedom do not appear wealthy in the beginning and often look completely ordinary. They tend to buy assets before status symbols because they understand the sequence differently. Year after year, assets create flexibility, and that flexibility gradually creates a greater sense of calm. At some point, they possess something that can feel more valuable than luxury because they can choose their next move. That ability to choose often becomes the highest form of wealth when life refuses to follow the original plan. Many people define wealth by the things that can be seen, even though most real wealth exists out of sight. Wealth is not only about what money can purchase, but also about what no longer creates constant worry. Do you have an emergency fund, and do you have enough room to breathe when unexpected expenses appear? Can you keep going if your job changes? Because questions like these are often more important than appearances. An expensive car may attract attention, but an emergency fund delivers a different kind of comfort. Luxury goods can create an impression, but assets create options. When life becomes uncertain, options are often more valuable than impressions. Impressions do not pay bills, and they do not provide protection when a crisis arrives. Financial freedom is not about looking superior, but about not feeling trapped. That difference is often invisible from the outside, yet it can be felt every day. Before spending money, a useful question is whether the purchase adds more choices or simply adds a stronger impression. The question sounds simple, yet the answer often changes a financial decision more than expected. Productive assets tend to create more options because their value continues working after the purchase is made. Learning a new skill can also expand choices by opening opportunities that were not previously available. Savings create breathing room, while investments create the potential for long-term growth through time. Financial margin creates a sense of calm, and that calm often shapes better decisions over time. The more choices a person has, the less influence social pressure tends to have on daily life. Security no longer depends on outside validation when a person feels protected by what has already been built. Over time, money is often associated with many goals, yet freedom remains one of its most important functions. Freedom often appears much simpler than status, even though people may value it far more over the long term. The biggest takeaway from this discussion may be that looking rich and actually becoming rich are two very different things. One often depends on being noticed by other people, while the other is usually built quietly over time. Social media constantly pulls attention toward what can be seen, even though the future is shaped by things that remain invisible. Productive assets rarely attract much attention, and skills usually receive far less recognition than visible status symbols. Yet both assets and skills share something more valuable because they can create additional choices when circumstances change. That may be a more practical definition of wealth than simply measuring how impressive a life appears from the outside. Instead, it may come down to how freely someone can live without constant financial pressure following them every day. If you enjoy discussions like this, consider subscribing to The Margin. And what is one purchase you made mainly to impress someone else?